let's look at one more example. Actually, it's great to talk about this painting because actually you painted the environment from life, really from overcast day, truly kind of capturing that feeling. And then you painted the pig in later from our film, The Dam Keeper. But you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, just, this was a part of an exercise. I did this demo as a part of Schoolism Live in Montreal, and just wanted to kind of add our character into the scene. And there's always this kind of challenge of adding sort of characters into the scene and trying to make sure that the characters fit in the environment. And it was kind of an exercise of like, can I just light this character, and it looks like he's in the environment. And again, it's all about what kind of quality of light. Is it direct or is it diffused? And the temperature of it, obviously, and of course how intense it is. And yeah, so this is the Overcast, and then I also did the version that's lit by the sun, somewhat like a rim lit. And you can kind of see how much, this is rim lit, so you can see even in the environment I started to kind of light with highlights, and also there's an influence of sky fill light on the shadow side, and there's a bit of a balanced light, which is a little hard to see in this particular angle of a character, but you can kind of see that still like around his cheek and stuff.
Yeah, when you talk about rim lit, right, it really means it's oftentimes a term we use when the light is just kind of creeping around a subject. And oftentimes that's from the light source being behind our object. And so that's, kind of what you were talking about, a little bit of it being a rim-lit subject. What I love about this is, I'm going to do this again, is like, it really feels like you're here in an overcast day, and you can feel how, at least for me, it almost feels like the day has progressed and time has passed and the light has moved around and come through the clouds, that sort of thing. What I really like about this way of painting is that oftentimes you can tell from that transition if something is working or not.
Yeah.
It really feels somewhat magical. If it's working right, it almost feels like you're getting to play with lights in this painting.
I think the idea is really you're manipulating lights, and at this point, even though you're painting, you're using your painting skill, but you're almost imagining in 3D space that you're moving the light, or turning on the light, or changing the intensity of light, or quality of light. That's really where it gets fun. And what's great about this method is that it really forces you to understand how light works in physical space. And when you're communicating with your 3D lighting team, then you're talking the same language with them, not just like, giving them pretty paintings.
Absolutely. Let's look at some kind of master paintings. This is a bourgeois. This is kind of the light setup we've been using, the neutral diffuse light setup. And I think overall we wanted to talk a little bit about the different qualities of light and how it can affect the feeling of a painting almost.
Yeah, so, sort of soft, diffuse light, it was very popular for this type of paintings back then, and it's like a Northlight studio setup. And, you have this painting, Alma Tadema, that, this almost looks like, even though it's an outdoor setup, it almost looks like they're inside, or the Overcast, even though the sky is blue. But it kind of has that quality of this soft light and very intense contact shadow, and then as opposed to direct light, like say this Caravaggio painting, he's famous for this particular intense lighting. It's just that it kind of gives you different lighting, compositionally very different, like light and dark separated very drastically. And
yeah, and I think too, direct light versus diffuse light. I think those are two things that I think we'd love for you to think about at this point in time. How does direct light affect a subject differently? What are the qualities that you're really looking for? And, intensity can create kind of a bounce light, which is a different kind of diffuse light, depending on the surface quality that light is bouncing off of. So these are simple ways to just start thinking about these simple qualities, simple things, diffused versus direct. So if we look at this John Singer Sargent painting, we can see this is a very direct light, sunlight coming through a window, but the intensity of the light, you can really feel this kind of light bouncing off the table surface. And you can see, for instance, like, you know, the gentleman in the yellow jacket who's facing away from the sun, his light is his face is being completely lit up by this diffuse light. And that's how you know, for instance, that it's a diffuse light, is because even though he's not facing the window and not facing the direction the light is coming from, the light is actually bouncing off the surface of the table in kind of all directions, lighting his face up. And I really love, too, how you can kind of see, you know, there's a bit of a warm ring around this light up in the kind of corner a little bit. I've always wondered, you know, like I see that sometimes in your paintings, Dice, like where there's like this bleed of warmth. You can kind of see it in different places. Can you talk us through some of that stuff?
Yeah, what's really interesting about the way light works is that, you know, it creates this kind of a temperature around the transition of light and shadow. And this is really where it gets really wonderful. Like, you can actually introduce, you know, temperature to the light without, like, when the sun is so intense that you can't really capture the temperature anymore, because, you know, there's only so much you could go. As you get brighter, you lose this saturation. So there's just kind of a small window of like space in between light and shadow where you can actually introduce this saturation to indicate the warmth of this light, which is really, really great. Another thing to think about is that, you know, this overall warmth is also created through this sense of light, you know, hitting the air. This is the part where, you know, we can't really create that in CG as much, because, you know, in CG you don't model air, right? So we always do cheats, you know, kind of creating these balloons and stuff. But in painting, it's the same thing. You have to be mindful of that the light is actually influencing the air too. So even in the shadow side, you have this kind of warm influence, you know, because the sun is saturating the air as well.
Let's also talk a little bit, like, how much is color and how much is value? So I look at this painting, and it feels really illuminated. John Singer Sargent painting, a watercolor. Obviously, he has this tint that's this translucent material. You have this wonderful kind of blue light. You have this nice white tint that shows you kind of the exact color almost of that light that's coming through, but also feels illuminated. If we look at this photo or this painting in black and white, you can see how much color is actually doing to create that sense of luminance and that real brightness that's coming from it.
Yeah, so in other words, when you're painting in black and white, which you really need to think about the value, like if the value is not right, the colors will never be right. So you can kind of see how different this impression of this black and white version of Sargent's tent painting is. And that means you really have to pay extra attention to, is this at this value, or does it look like it because the color is this? You know, obviously we know that the warm colors tend to, you know, jump out at your eyes, that you tend to make warm values lighter. And it's that kind of tendencies that we have to be mindful of.
Yeah, it was really shocking for me, you know, to see this difference between the colored version and the black and white version.
It doesn't look as lit, huh?
It doesn't, yeah. But I think it's good information for us to remember that our eyes and brains work together, and it can be deceiving to create that sense of luminance. Let's look at another Sargent painting, very famous painting of these girls with the lanterns. And, you know, this painting has always been stunning because of that, again, that sense of luminosity in the lanterns that are here. But, you know, this one, again, is a shocking thing to see the difference between the colored version and the black and white version. When we see the black and white version, it really, in my opinion, really loses that sense of luminosity. So again, like I think, you know, it's an important thing to pay attention to as you're painting is what especially as we're going to paint in value, like really paying attention to what's color versus value overall.
Yeah, this is also another one of Soroya's, and this is a beautiful sort of use of a light composition, but if you look at the whole picture, it's mostly in shadow, but you're really kind of seeing the shadow side and where the light is hitting their bodies and the clothes and kind of are blown out. But this is probably another one, right? Like the color is playing a huge role, but if you squint at it, you still get the sense that it's lit. That means he's keeping all the shadow elements within a group of shadow values and then leaving the room for the light to stay bright.
And if you look at the shadow side, right, that's pretty much a diffuse light setup. So this painting overall is actually fairly simple. It's kind of a diffuse light setup, and then just kind of hitting light coming through these slats to pick out this direct light.
That's the thing that you probably start to kind of understand why we've been focusing on diffuse light until now. But diffuse lighting, once you master the diffuse lighting, you can really apply that to the sunlight as well, because any light that's in the shadow side of the sunlight setup is diffuse light, whether it's a bounce light or the skylight. It's usually diffused. Yeah, same thing with this. If you look at the little kid, smaller kid on the screen right, she is mostly in shadow. And you know what? This is the diffuse lighting. She's painted diffused. And on the other hand, the girl on the left, upper body is lit by a strong sun, and that's direct light. You can see the cast shadow from her arm and on her face, and you can see the difference between the direct and the diffuse lights.
The one thing I wanted to throw in was these Monet paintings, because Monet would do series of paintings, same subject matter, but different light situations.
Yeah, we all know, right? Monet always studied light, and obviously we'll love to talk about his colors in the color section, but if you look at the quality of light, he really studied every single quality of light that is out there in nature. Backlight, sunlight, frontal lighting, and then diffuse lighting, and just you can really see that you can study so many sort of quality of lights and colors, but at the end of the day, you can almost break it down to two qualities of light: direct and diffused.